question many of us are asked as gifted educators is, why do we identify? The textbook response to this question is, identification ensures that appropriate programming meets the academic and affective needs and post-secondary outcomes of identified gifted students. However, beyond the textbook response, if we examine what we know to be true in our hearts and minds as educators, we know that by not identifying students with exceptional abilities, the outcome may very well be a student who is unable to pursue their passions, work to their potential, fulfill their dreams, or recognize their remarkable promise. We will begin by reviewing some important terminology as it pertains to our gifted education rules and identification. Gifted education rules ensure that if a student moves from one district in Colorado to another district in the state, the student retains his or her gifted identification. This is a concept referred to as portability. The idea of portability is new, and it was introduced with the passing of House Bill 1102. Portability, then, means a student's identification in one or more categories of giftedness transfers to any district in our state. Gifted programming, then, must continue according to the receiving district's programming options they have available. As stated before, portability of identification must be a part of the student's permanent record and recorded in the Advanced Learning Plan. One important note: what happens if a Colorado district does not follow the criteria as stated in guidelines? Well, then the receiving district, if they find the body of evidence to be incomplete, that receiving district must consult with, as practical, that former district, the parents, and even possibly the student, and then move forward and reevaluate the identification determination. Portability does not include students who move to Colorado from another state. Portability is about students within Colorado. However, if you are a region heavily impacted by military students moving into your district, it is important that you review the process and procedures for gifted military students in terms of the Military Compact Agreement. Information about this agreement can be found at the Military Child Education Coalition website. When we hear the word assessment, we often think of a test. But assessment, in terms of gifted identification, is the process of gathering information using appropriate tests, instruments, and techniques. The information then is gathered for a specific purpose, such as for a screening or a classification or selection, for curriculum planning or diagnosis, program planning, and progress evaluation. Districts have a choice in the tests, instruments, and techniques used in the gifted identification process. Gifted identification must also contain a body of evidence. A body of evidence contains data to identify the area of giftedness defined in the definition of gifted children, and then determines that individualized programming services to meet those unique learning needs. Now, the body of evidence will also guide us in the development of the Advanced Learning Plan. Again, it is the choice of the administrative unit to determine what elements go into building a body of evidence. A body of evidence is comprised of both quantitative data and qualitative data. An example of quantitative data might include a normed reference test, such as a cognitive assessment or an achievement test. It may also include criterion reference tests, such as our state assessment or curriculum-based measures that you have in your district. Qualitative data might include a completion of a rubric to observe a student in conducting a certain performance, to complete a checklist, or perhaps interview an educator or even the student. Again, it is the choice of the administrative unit to determine the types of quantitative and qualitative data that will be used to make up the body of evidence. Now, here is an example of the different types of information that can develop a body of evidence. Now, these might include things such as a cognitive test, achievement tests, a norm reference observation scale, performance evaluation, a creativity test, and then parental input, and then additional data, such as those classroom diagnostic tests, an interview, or perhaps that checklist. Now, specific data within the body of evidence will be used to qualify the student for gifted identification. However, other parts of the body of evidence will help build the student's learning profile. Criteria then are those rules for evaluating a level of exceptionality that we will use for the identification assessment process. The 95th percentile ranking and above describe the rule for exceptionality when using a normed reference standardized test, for example. Now, other tests have performance levels. Sometimes performance levels are distinguished, advanced, or demonstrate that the student is exceeding expectations. Such performance levels may be found on certain qualitative tools that you use, the use of evaluating a portfolio or a performance, or perhaps in our criterion reference state assessments. Now, it is important to note that criteria are not cut-off scores. A cut score is often referred to as a gatekeeper. And we know that one score should never keep a student out of a possible gifted determination if all the other data over time support exceptionality. We'll spend some more time on this concept later in the webinar.